LE model from Cybot Galactica. That designation was actually used twice centuries ago. The older of the two is an LE repair droid. Their primary function is ship repair, much like an astromech. Unlike an R2 unit, the LE can speak basic. Their humanoid form is closer to 99 than 3PO. No polished bronzium plating, just exposed joints and wiring. This one is not specifically an android, but has masculine programming. As a secondary role, the LE droid is the radio man. A freighter captain like Dash Rendar has other priorities. An LE can handle the landing permits on your behalf.
Welcome to your first day on the job. This is your very own autopilot.
This brings us to another LE model from 300 years ago. That's 3 times older than the 3PO series. We can tell they were older protocol droids, since that's what an LE is. The LE manifest droid is based on 3PO's ancestor. Instead of etiquette, a manifest droid knows about paperwork. What had been a secondary function of a repair droid was now the sole purpose. There's no need for much translation. A dozen languages would be plenty. The critical knowledge is of spaceport regulations and red tape. Like the R3 and R4, this is a droid for a different market. Han Solo likes astromech droids and treadwells. They're very useful in repairing his ship.
Check it at the other end. Wait a second. You alright?
He doesn't have much patience for C-3PO and would never buy one.
Shut him up or shut him down.
However, you might be able to sell an LE manifest droid to a freighter captain. If I owned a Vitrox 720 and an R4, this would be my second purchase. Though based on a protocol droid, there are certain hardware changes. Perhaps most notable is the waist. There is no gap in the droid plating. Most droids of that kind have a flexible section at the waist somewhere. We can assume the LE has a more limited range of motion than most droids. While that might work in a throne room, it's safer to have the waist covered. Aside from that, LE has only one notable feature. Her feet are said to be magnetic. That would serve no purpose for a diplomat, but aboard ship it's quite helpful.
There you go. Now you swap around like you're in palms.
What do you know? But it's like to walk in palms.
I didn't always go to space.
Cybot Galactica has made one other modification from the base protocol droid. Princesses and Simpsons are content with the 3PO series. Freighter captains tend to lose patience when dealing with etiquette droids. As part of fixing this, LE droids were built with feminine programming. A droid's personality is a very important feature. That's why the R2 is so popular. By having an endearing attitude, a droid can avoid the off switch.
The Empire may be gracious enough.
Thanks.
Let's bring this back around to DC-14. I have always considered her to be a normal 3PO droid. There are millions of droids, so the names must be more elaborate than what we hear. Droids would have to select a locally unique name. There's also a preference for putting the model number in the name. That would mean TC-14 and TC-3 are normal names for 3PO droids. There is no TC model, and C-3PO is a 3PO. All the hardware is identical. No 3POs used Tranlang 2s. Nor is there any merit to the claim of traditional feminine programming. That seems to be an invention of 2012 with no basis in Star Wars. As a standard 3PO, TC-14 can't come from a mostly female production run. We've seen what Cybot Galactica does when making a new kind of protocol droid. If you wanted a protocol droid of a different model, LE would be the one. Manifest droids were made for customers just like the Trade Federation. Let's not try to infer any lore from TC-14. The Phantom Menace changed Star Wars forever. Traditionally, a lightsaber was always described using 3 words. Cut through anything. Sometimes it's almost anything or practically anything. In the original movies, they were always used as blades. Han slices a tauntaun, which tells us almost nothing.
Hang on, kid.
We do see flames dancing along the saddle straps. Luke cuts open an AT-AT hatch, which is the most tool-like usage. Episode 1 changes everything by establishing limits.
We will not survive this.
Qui-Gon strides boldly over to a door. This appears to be a normal interior door, a quarter decimeter thick, much like the doors aboard the Death Star or the Enterprise. The lightsaber slices through with contemptuous ease. So far, it's all gone as expected. Everyone knows that a saber can cut through anything. Perhaps the best example is from Cloud City. Darth Vader slices through a set of triple columns, leaving an exposed cut. It seems fair to assume that the exterior is metal and possibly all the way through. The exposed surface is blackened, even more so after the duct tape has been removed.
That's a lot of damage.
This sets the standard for using lightsabers against metal. At the time of the prequels, we have significantly more options. Qui-Gon leaves a glowing trail in the wake of his blade, as if the metal of the door is left white hot, gradually cooling down. It certainly seems to blister, trying to flow away from the blade. Qui-Gon will be through this door in seconds. However, the Neimoidians have their their sleeves.
Close the blast doors.
That's right, blast doors, as seen on the Death Star. These doors seem to be an inferior design to the Imperial version. Both types slide apart into two halves. However, these Trade Federation ones don't have any overlap. When the doors close, they actually interact with the blade. The first blast door causes the lightsaber blade to bend. You can still see the blade, despite the door closing around it. Finally, the second blast door hides the lightsaber from view. Blast doors are extremely large and heavy slabs of metal. Opening and closing them takes real effort and big drive systems. Qui-Gon, standing right next to the door, senses a heavy double thud. Our Master Jedi doesn't finish the incident. This time he stabs into all three doors. Immediately, the metal begins to sizzle and smoke. Before long, the center of the door melts away. A chunk in line with the saber falls to the floor. Things are looking grim for the Federation.
These Federation types are cowards.
This looks amazing and it's informative. We're shown that the lightsaber can still cut through almost anything. More importantly, it has a limit. Qui-Gon can't wave his sword at a wall and have it fall away. Even cutting through a thin door will take 20 seconds. To get through multiple blast doors, it could be several minutes. That's an exceptional solution to the Red Faction effect.
The door's jammed. Blast around it if you can.
If your sword can cut through anything, why not use it? Luke could have sliced a path directly into his cell.
Let me try mine.
No!
The moment a character gains certain tools, the world falls apart.
And now, Your Highness, we will discuss the location.
Suddenly, the strength of a lock doesn't matter. It's always easier to get in through the wall. This scene tells us why Jedi can't walk through walls. That part is good, but it gets better. Despite putting limits on them, lightsabers didn't get weaker. As far as we can see, they still cut through anything. The lazy answer would have been lightsaber-resistant materials. Placing a limit on battery life wouldn't solve anything. You'd just reload your saber batteries after cutting each door. Using time is a much better constraint, and it lines up with the original lore. Most of the original lore, at least. There's one detail out of place. Lightsabers are said to emit no heat. That metal is glowing very hot, so what's going on? We know it's some kind of stable energy. Battery life is almost unlimited, multiple years of use. A lightsaber only loses energy when the blade touches an object. With this information, we can make an educated guess. When the lightsaber is idle, it doesn't give off any heat. Sabers are not a container field around some hot plasma. The blade itself isn't particularly hot.
Toast. Bread. While you're slicing.
I reckon the heat only appears when an object resists the saber blade. That would mean you can cut through paper and kindling without causing a fire. The perfect fire hazard would be some kind of dense hardwood. That also allows for a flesh wound to be cauterized. Think back to the Tauntaun saddle straps. Only the leather caught fire because of the dense material. For a lightsaber to cause any significant heat, it needs a lot of metal. No matter the door, the blade passes through with virtually no resistance. Like a monomolecular blade through, well, anything. Looking for evidence, we find some subtle hand movements.
Little click out of pin 1.
If I'm right, we'd expect blade movement to generate heat. The door wouldn't get any hotter unless there's some metal touching the Qui-Gon does is similar to the optimal move. There's not enough movement to make a real difference though. I'm not sure what the official answer is, not anymore. On one hand, certain Disney books avoid saying the blade is hot. Melt after exposure to a lightsaber blade is vague. Other books are less cautious about lightsaber technology. Original lore may say energy, but never plasma. Saying a lightsaber blade is plasma would imply it's very hot. Personally, I see plasma blades as a serious problem. A hot blade must emit light and heat. Anytime the plasma saber is active, it would lose energy. Suddenly, battery life becomes a serious concern. There's no way a portable heater can run for years without recharging. Lightsabers being hot would genuinely shatter my immersion. Think of when Mr. Spock heats up a rock with his phaser. It would be unbelievable if the phaser battery never ran out.
To function with a substitute fuel supply. Our phasers. I can adapt them and use their energy.
Hot plasma blades work the same way. You need a much bigger power source. Something backpack-sized, I would say.
Let's see now. There.
Regardless of how sabers work, it will take time to cut through. Qui-Gon never gets a chance to finish the job. The Phantom Menace has more than a few surprises in store for us. The next is another kind of battle droid, the Droideka. These are mobile blaster turrets, a kind of super battle droid. When set up on all three legs, droidekas have a slow walking speed. This lack of mobility would have been a severe flaw. To compensate, these destroyer droids were given a wheeled mode. Transforming between them takes about 1 second. Originally, they were called Baron droids, though this name was dropped. Early concept art was simply a heavier version of the standard battle droids. One of these designs would reappear under the name of E4 Baron droid. Destroyer droids have a combination of technology that represents a true threat to these Knights of Justice. The second time we ever see a lightsaber used, it's to deflect bolts of energy. Being able to parry a blaster volley is also the second force ability we see. It is absolutely right for Jedi to be able to block a withering torrent of fire like this, but they aren't invincible, and with good planning, their enemies can win. That puts the movie into a grounded realm. We're not dealing with Superman or the Hulk here. They can't just pull out a new power.
I don't think so. No one can do that.
To beat them, a blast door, a shield, and a repeating blaster are all it takes. If you have a squad of Space Marine Devastators or Fire Warriors, you can force a few Jedi to retreat. From the OT, we know that an ambush or a dark side force user can also work.
You take it to figure out a way to get out of this place.
I left you, I was but the...
Combined with trying to protect others, that makes it easy for the movie to present a threat. In fact, 2 battle droids are already enough to match the Jedi in combat. Jedi do not crave combat. There is no reason to stand and fight. They are in a difficult situation, a narrow corridor, a kill zone. Every blaster bolt flying down the corridor is a danger. Retreating under fire would be hazardous, even with lightsabers. Naturally, the Jedi pull out a new power.
This is an unexpected move.
To escape from the destroyer droids, the Knights use a force sprint.
Let's go.
This isn't a recurring feature. We almost never see it again. This power of celerity is related to the agility of the Jedi. The combat in the prequels is very acrobatic, much more than in the original movies. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon both display an incredible jump height. The Force Jump ability is actually from the original trilogy. In Empire Strikes Back, Luke jumps out of the freezing chamber. This is a vertical jump, several meters straight up from a standing start. It is impressive. Most impressive. It seems logical to assume the same ability can be used in another direction, such as along a corridor instead of straight up. It bothers me far less than, say, R2-D2 having hover thrusters. Since the Jedi are not warriors, it's perfectly fitting for them to run away. There are alternatives to fighting. At the 8-minute mark, we are introduced to the mother of the Skywalker siblings. As queen of a small planet, she starts with as much prestige as Princess Leia did. sense for the royal Organa family to have adopted that lineage. However, notice how everything so far has taken place in orbit. There has been no sign of the planet Naboo except the establishing shot of the blockade. It lurks in the background, under the windows. The Jedi have decided to store aboard the landing ships.
Let's stow aboard, sir.
15 seconds later, Queen Amidala appears for the first time. The first sight of the planet is at 9 minutes, after the Federation start talking about the surface. The next minute shows a communications disruption on Naboo. We have just seen Lord Sidious communicating via hologram. Now we see someone else using the same technology. The Queen addresses him as Senator Palpatine. Massive spoiler alert, but it turns out Sidious and Palpatine and the Emperor are all the same man. For someone watching this movie before the OT, there's just enough similarity to pick up on. Two people using holograms within 4 minutes. Coincidence? I think not. The Emperor appeared only in hologram form until Episode 6.
The son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi.
More importantly, the name Palpatine is never spoken in the OT. To those who read the novelization, he was Emperor Palpatine. To a casual viewer who only saw the movies, he is only the Emperor.
Just received word that the Emperor is the Emperor now. The Emperor is the Emperor. The Emperor. The Emperor.
To the Emperor. One of the Emperor's members. The Emperor! And the Emperor.
The Phantom Menace was definitely made with these two viewpoints in mind. On one hand, those without prior knowledge get to know Senator Palpatine.
I will be trusted.
At some point during the prequels, these people will realize Darth Sidious and Palpatine are the same man.
Must do something quickly to stop the Federation.
I think we're going to some Federation control for the time being.
The other camp recognizes the name Palpatine. They know he will become Emperor, but the characters do not.
There is a question of procedure, but I'm confident we can do it.
That's a dramatic irony, that is. The 10th minute of the movie shows the Trade Federation landing their ground forces. This is good. As we all know, you can't just fly a Star Destroyer down into the atmosphere. If you could do that, you could deploy your ground forces by extending a crane from a hovering ship. It's very clear that the Federation harbor ships can't descend below orbit. The Lucahulk class has a diameter of 3,170 meters, but since it's a circular ship, that doesn't really get the size across. Times pi, that's 9,959 meters of circumference. If you straighten the ship out, it's 10 kilometers long. Quite a massive ship, and the fleet has dozens of them. If they didn't have a droid army inside, their cargo bays would be big enough to hold a dwarven city. "10 kilometers is a remarkably large ship. It's the size of 8 Mon Calamari MC-80B cruisers, 1.2 kilometers, 6 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, 1.6 kilometers. It'd be more than half the length of the Eclipse, 17.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers longer than a Super Star Destroyer, 8 kilometers, or, if you prefer, 1,037 A-wings long, 9.6 meters. There's no way you can bring something that ungainly in to land. We'll get around to tackling Star Destroyers in atmosphere, don't you worry. Instead, the Trade Federation Army comes with landing craft. Each of these has a wingspan of 370 meters. I suppose you could just about use these as cargo shuttles for non-military goods. To handle the strain of landing something that large, they're mostly held together by structural integrity fields. All seems fine to me. You'd need something that large to transport a grand army. We've established that the Federation has phenomenal cargo capacity. In order to justify that, they must have enough money to fill those elite holds. That's also the scale of organization you need for this, to build a droid army with custom designs. The Old Republic is exactly the place you'd expect to find a wealthy merchant fleet. Though we've never seen them before, these Nemoidians are a credible threat. They do seem awfully similar to the Duros. Duros are one of the oldest races in the galaxy, experienced spacers, generally well respected and good-natured. With the size of their fleet, it's clear the Nemoidians inherited some of these traits.
We have taken over the last pockets of primitive life.
With their actions, it's no wonder the Duros deny any relation to them. This is a perfect example of something all too often overlooked. You don't need to save the galaxy every week. Not everything needs to affect the balance of power in the wider universe.